This land suffers. Torn apart by Dong Zhuo's cruel tyranny. Yuan Shao, my friend, leader of the coalition. Together, we will put this chaos to an end! Yet, at our most desperate, you will fail us. And reveal yourself unfit to lead. So I will banish this chaos. This kingdom will be brought to order. For I would rather betray the world than have the world betray me. Ah, a new opponent. Let us begin.
It has been almost 6 months since we last had news regarding Three Kingdoms Total War, and bombshells were dropped today regarding arguably the most anticipated historical release in recent memory. I would not be surprised in the slightest if 3K manages to outsell even Rome 2, especially if CA can tap into the burgeoning East Asian market, but there is a long way to go yet, and there's some really good news regarding the game and a change of release date as well. So let's dive right in. Probably the most important question people have been asking about Three Kingdoms Total War is how CA would handle the romanticized and fantasy elements that are so prevalent in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And if you've ever read that novel, or even played the Dynasty Warriors series of games, you'll know that this is a period often depicted as larger than life, with heroes that can slaughter hundreds of armed enemies single-handedly and plunge into the thick of the fighting to outduel other legendary opponents. But as we know, that isn't particularly realistic. Warlords like Lu Bu may have been a person you would not want to pursue, but at the end of the day, he was human, he was a mortal, and it's not reasonable to believe that he could just slice through ranks upon ranks of Chinese infantry like Deadpool at a chimichanga buffet. And there is a sizable portion of the Total War community that wants a purely historical, relatively realistic Chinese setting without the over-the-top flair and ridiculous feats of daring do. So, Creative Assembly have done something they have never done in the past, ever. For Three Kingdoms Total War, they are bringing us the best of both worlds. By default, there will be a romanticized campaign, similar to what you might have read in the epic novel if you've read that before, that the game is actually based on. Characters will be able to slice and dice through hundreds of rank-and-file warriors in a manner very similar to what we already know is common in Total War Warhammer, appearing as single entities with high HP pools, powerful attacks, and functioning much like legendary lords do that so many of us have grown to love. However, there will also be a new classic mode on the way as well that will provide those more interested in a worldly view of the conflict with content more like the traditional historical Total Wars, and that will be a completely separate game mode that people can play if they want to play that as well. In classic mode, these heroes will appear in battle the way you might expect a regular Total War general would. Mere mortals who will march into battle at the center of a bodyguard unit rather than fighting as single entities all by themselves. So in short, by default, characters in Total War Three Kingdoms take center stage, helping to turn the tide with their flamboyant wushu martial arts. But Classic Mode will focus more on historical troop maneuvers, where victory is defined by superior army compositions and battlefield tactics. Now I imagine, and I hope, those things will be very important no matter which mode you choose, but the romance version will give the famous characters like Guan Yu, like Zhang Fei, and many others the opportunity to make a truly big impact on a battle, a la Legendary Lords in Total War Warhammer, and hopefully allow players a much more interesting skill tree and customization options compared to many of the other previous Total War games. I think this is something that Warhammer absolutely nailed, allowing players access to a very deep talent tree with real impactful decisions to be made that can make a big impact on your campaign as well. And I think this is a gigantic step forward for the Total War series, and I could not possibly be more pleased with their decision to make a game that works on satisfying both pure historical fans and those who want a more over-the-top style. Hopefully, CA will be able to deliver deep, nuanced, and entertaining experiences on both fronts, rather than leaving that Lords are now bigger and scarier and better in melee, and keeping that as the only meaningful differentiation between the two. Because I think there's an opportunity here to add a massive amount of replayability and truly unique campaign experiences. I want both of these game modes to encourage players to branch out. I want each to feel completely fresh and unique and different, and make people go out of their way to try both Romance and Classic Mode. So I'll be very curious to see how far CA is willing to actually differentiate the two, outside of the obvious, Lu Bu just murdered a fourth of your army by himself. Like, we know that's going to be a thing between the two, but I don't want that to be the only factor of differentiation there. And these options, these separate game modes, are honestly a great hint that CA may one day allow us even greater control over customizing and personalizing our campaigns. And for me, that's probably the end game of this series, right? That's probably the thing that will make it more unique than any game I've ever played and truly add a massive amount of replayability, is when we have sliders, when we have a massive amount of options before each of our campaigns, no matter which game it is, that allow us to personalize it for ourselves. If we want the AI to be very aggressive, if we can change start positions, all that ourselves, if there's basically a huge host of sliders that we have full control over at the start of a campaign, I think that would be truly the end game, and I think this is one more step in that direction. Now, also important for me to note, Three Kingdoms Total War has been delayed until spring of 2019. Initial release was planned for fall of this year, but it's clear now that they won't be able to hit that mark because they want to deliver a more polished experience, is what they've said in their blog post. And as disappointing as that is, I think we can all agree a delay for a more polished product is vastly superior to releasing something that is in a completely broken state a la Rome 2. And I think it's very clear at this point, after multiple releases, they've gotten the message loud and clear. Believe me, I don't want to wait another 9 or so months for this game either. I really want to get my hands on it, I really want to try it out, and new content is always going to be a great thing for a Total War channel, obviously, but it is what it is. And if it comes out smooth and beautiful and awesome come spring of 2019, I am all for that kind of delay as long as it makes for a better end product. But in the meantime, we can talk a little bit about the trailer and the characters brought to life within, and maybe a little bit of discussion about what this all might have to do in terms of an actual gameplay experience. So we start off the trailer with Yuan Shao and Cao Cao, who will go on to become one of the most important figureheads in the Wei Dynasty, having some discourse. And I'm getting massive Age of Empires, Age of Kings vibes here, sitting inside that castle with another king, playing some chess in front of a fire, moving the pieces on the board and moving armies in real life, only this time they're playing Go, not chess, which is one of the longest running board games in history, dating back more than 2 millennia. And it's going to set the stage for a betrayal. They are ultimately part of the same coalition, opposing the tyranny of Dong Zhuo, but of course, after his inevitable defeat and the crushing of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, that sets the stage for Wei, Wu, and Shu to begin their climactic civil war for the heart of the country. And we of course get his iconic line, "I would rather betray the world than have the world betray me." And I will say, the soundtrack and art direction so far have been amazing. That main riff we've heard in every trailer about the boy who goes to war at 15 years old and comes back at 80, a withered and broken husk, that music is haunting. It is beautiful, And I think for the most part, CA has done a great job with their OSTs in the past couple of Total Wars. Even in the Warhammer series, I think it has a beautiful OST, especially with the Elves and the Empire soundtracks. But if what we've heard so far is anything to go by, they are raising the bar here. It is so immersive, and I am in love with it so far. And from a color palette and costume design perspective, the game just seems to pop and come alive, and that is super important, and one of my favorite things about Shogun 2. A lot of the vibes I'm getting here are along the same lines as Shogun, which is one of my favorite games of all time. Not just Total War games, games in general. And look at that set piece siege right there. I think that's actually a look at the Battle of Guandu, which was a siege between Yuan Shao and Cao Cao, and a very important battle of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms and the Three Kingdoms period in general. We also got a great look at Shahudun, the One-Eyed Tiger, one of Cao Cao's most trusted generals, and he's basically been immortalized in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms when he takes an arrow to the eyeball, rips it out of his own face, and eats in front of his enemies. Complete badass power move right there. And of course, we have Liu Bei, who is the leader of the Shu Coalition, one of the rival dynasties, basically competing for control of China in general. We're getting a good look at an interlocked shield wall here. Basically, warfare in this time period will be focused very heavily on crossbow and pike and shot. So you'll have ranks upon ranks of spearmen, with phalanxes very kind of like almost tower shields with crossbows firing over the top. There will be some cavalry, particularly on the way side of things. Again, another look at Shahudun there. And I think one of the biggest points of Creative Assembly's work here is how much are they going to differentiate the factions? How far are they going to go in terms of military and tactical variation? Now, there is plenty in the historical record that shows that there was a decent amount of variation there. We're going to have sabers, we're going to have shields, we're going to have lots of different rank and file troops. But are they going to go really far into it in terms of differentiating heavy cavalry between the factions and differentiating range units, making Shu perhaps have a bigger focus on crossbows, while Wei will be the cavalry faction and all that? I think they'll probably go very similar to how they've done it in historical games in the past, where they'll go with one faction being a focus on cavalry, and then perhaps even if the historical record doesn't indicate there was a massive amount of differentiation between cavalry, adding a little bit of spice in there just to liven up the battlefield, make it a little bit more interesting. Because if we just have levy cavalry for all factions, that's going to be a little bit boring. So they're going to want to go in and make that a little bit spicier, make it a little bit more variation, a little bit more differentiation between those factions. Because you really want to add that, make sure that everything is flared up and looking good. So it's going to be really interesting to see how CA decides to handle the military aspect of this game. I am really looking forward to it overall, and I hope you guys are as well. So let me know what you thought of the trailer in general. Are you happy with what you've seen so far? This was an in-engine look, so of course it's not actual gameplay, but it gives us a decent indication of what we might be able to expect from sieges, where we saw a lot of fire, a lot of siege gameplay a la Attila, where we're being able to see entire cities go up in smoke, go up in flames, and get a much more layered tactical defense than perhaps we had in Warhammer, which is something I'm certainly very much looking forward to. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the trailer. Really curious what you guys think. And what do you think of the delay? Are you happy about that? Are you sad about it? Is it a little bit of sweet, a little bit of sour? That's probably how I'm feeling, because I would love to get my hands on the game very soon, but at the same time, making sure it's not trash is pretty important. Making sure it's polished is going to be a really important thing. So yeah, I will see you all next time. Hope you guys enjoyed this look. And let me know what you think of the differentiation between both classic and fantasy elements. I think that's going to be probably the biggest selling point for this game in general, because it's going to be able to bring in both sides of the spectrum and unite them under one banner. I'll see you next time. Indie Pride, signing out for now.